Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Legal Weekly Wine. Today, the hottest legal topic of the week is Donald Trump. Not uncommon, but this week, he has started his trial, the criminal trial against him in New York for the Stormy Daniels hush money case. So this is our topic of today. We're going to hit a few small things off and on, but what I want to tell you is we are going to talk about the gag order that he's under. We're going to talk about the alleged violations of the gag order that he's under, what's going to happen with those motions, potential comments that may also be violations of the gag order. We are going to talk about all other comments and conduct that Trump has had during the beginning of this jury trial. We're going to talk about the jury selection that is happening this week and may conclude this week, may conclude next week. We are also going to talk about the difference between the civil trials he's had, including the last civil trial he did in the same court, in the Manhattan District Court, the Supreme Court is what they call it. We're going to talk about that and how it's different from the case that he's in right now. The procedures are different. He's under different requirements. And I think it's really interesting and fascinating to break down, why is he required to attend this trial? Why is he there? Why does he have to be there? What does that mean? What are the other requirements? Why is the judge acting differently than the last judge for the civil case? We're going to break down those procedures, why they're different, what's expected of him, as with all defendants. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We have so many things that have happened in the last 6 weeks that we have not hit. We have been on a bit of a break. I have had some medical issues going on, but we are back. We should be back continuously, and we are going to address so many of those other issues that have happened in March and April in other episodes. So stay tuned for multiple episodes during the week so we can kind of catch up on those. We will later be talking about the Newport News shooting, the 6-year-old shooting. We are later going to be talking about the Apple lawsuit, the obstruction charges that the Supreme Court is considering related to January 6th. We're going to talk about the abortion issues that are everywhere right now, including this law from the 1800s. We're going to talk about the Rust issues, the armorer who was just convicted, what's going on with Alec Baldwin, and the Crumley case that happened in these last 6 weeks. I'm Virginia Tehrani. I am the host and CEO of The Law Unscripted, which is hosting the Legal Weekly Wine. I am also the attorney and CEO of Tehrani Law, LLC, which is a personal injury law firm in Maryland, D.C., and Virginia. And I am pleased to be joined by my colleague and fellow attorney in Tehrani Law and also a co-chair of The Law Unscripted, Chelsey Rogers. Welcome.
Hey, it's good to be here. Glad to be back.
I'm glad we are back, and I'm glad to have you. Chelsey's been with us for the Weekly Wine and the Law Unscripted podcast from the very beginning in December 2022. I'm glad she came back. I'm glad she's in Tehrani Law. We're thrilled to have you.
I'm thrilled to be here. I'm super pumped for our talk today.
I think we're all on edge trying to talk about it. So we're excited to be here. Dr. Vial, John Vial from the Honors College. He's the Dean of the Honors College at Middle Tennessee State University. He is an expert on the Constitution, the amending process, constitutional law, and many other fields. You have been a co-host with us for almost a year, and I'm glad to have you back.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Are you excited about today's talk?
Yes, I sort of wish we had about 8 hours to cover it. But
it may be a 2 or 3 parter or multiple. I mean, the trial's going to be a long time.
Yes, it is.
So what we may have to do is do like one podcast a week for Trump's trial and then everything else that's going on another one. But Dr. Vial, the interesting thing with Dr. Vial is he taught mock trial, which is for undergrads and law students who are learning the procedure of trial, how trial works, how to do an opening statement. He taught that, was it at least 2 decades? How many years?
25 years.
25 years at Middle Tennessee, and I am one of his students. I think you can tell how good his teaching is based on my career. But I also think his experience is vital and interesting for this talk when we get into trial. Chelsey was part of mock trials in law school, as was I. And now we're in real trials 18 and a half years for me. And this criminal stuff, I'm trying not to interject or interrupt you all through this thing. So we'll see. So yay, Trump. Now, with this, in the last 6 weeks, one of the most monumental things that has happened is OJ Simpson has passed. I remember this very clearly. I was in high school when the chase happened. I still remember watching it on TV. Dad, John Biles, also my dad. Dad, I know that you remember it very clearly as well. As a political science teacher, as a mock trial coach, I know it was impactful for you. Chelsey, I know it's been impactful for you in learning the law. I mean, how many law school classes and teachers refer back to the OJ Simpson case?
Absolutely. I
like
mean,
Trump.
Yes.
The parallels here are you have this public persona who is one thing,
A hero.
and maybe private, very different. And, partly, although I think in Trump's case, sometimes they have merged a little bit more than in OJ's, but
Yeah.
it's still, everybody's drawn to whatever the charges would be for either of these, the public is going to be drawn to it.
Yes. And just like OJ, there are civil and criminal trials
Yes.
for his
yeah, that's why
conduct.
it's so infamous. That's why the OJ case is so infamous in law school, because I don't think you could pick sort of one series of events that highlights all of the different aspects of the legal system so succinctly. But now with some of the Trump stuff, I think we might have some like new examples for the attorneys that are, coming up now.
Absolutely.
And,
This
and
is so
particularly burden of
significant.
proof.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The burden of proof for a civil versus a criminal trial. And we are going to put a link up here. Hopefully now we're trying to figure it out on YouTube. For those on the audio, you can't see the link. We're going to put it in the description in the comments down below. So you can check that out. But we have, Chelsey and I, our first 3 podcast episodes for the Law Unscripted podcast specifically dealt with the OJ Simpson case. We did
cases.
Right. Cases. So it was, what is the difference between civil and criminal law? Yeah. And it's a 3-part series. We also include Rodney King, who was at the same time. And they kind of converged all together. So we have a 3-part series that we're going to put at least the first podcast on it in a link in the description and here that you can access. So if you want to find out more about that, please go there, because I think it is important with the Trump trials. That background is important. What is that difference? We are going to hit on some of it today, but if you want a really good breakdown, check out those episodes. Now, we also have some others that in order to get up to speed with what's happening in the trial this week, we have a Legal Weekly Wine podcast, episode 16, where Chelsey and I broke down all 34 indictments. People don't understand them. This is a very complicated case. They think it's about Stormy Daniels and the hush money, and it sort of is, but it's not. So it's highlighted in the media as Stormy Daniels and this hush money, and it's
because sex sells. We know this,
does.
right? Like it makes for a good headline, right? Like people saying fraudulent business transactions, I don't think has quite the ring to it. It doesn't give it as much pizzazz.
Right. And so if it were a trial, I think people assume that it was a trial. It is a trial for, did he sleep with her? But it's not. It has nothing. I mean, yes, there will be evidence of it. There has to be the background evidence because it leads up to it. But ultimately, this is a trial on financial transactions.
Yeah.
34 financial transactions. It is, you authorized a check was cut, and a check was cashed. This is 33 transactions like this, with the 34th, that was a different time, but 11 months of transactions. So the jury is considering that.
But it's also related, right, to campaign finance.
Yes.
And as to whether the transaction illegally was used to suppress information during a campaign.
Exactly.
But again, that's not nearly as sexy as
Stormy Daniels.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. So if you want a great background and breakdown of exactly what the indictments are, what needs to be proven, and why they're there, including the campaign finance, check out this this podcast that we have. It's episode 16. I'm going to try to put it here on YouTube, and we'll put that in the links as well in the comments below. So that's another one to check out, as well as one of our other podcasts. I think it was a 2 or 3 part series on jury selection and what a jury does. Chelsey and I have that on the Law Unscripted. And I know we're saying a lot, but it's really important, because if you want this background as to it all explains what we're saying and what we've done the prior podcasts on. Explain what is happening this week, what is happening for the next 8 weeks or whatever. So check out our jury selection episodes, our jury questions. We go through all of, how they're selected, why they're put on, who gets off. We go through all of the jury experience in a 3-part series. Check that out. We'll put it in the links below. So that's the background for today. We're going to include some of the same information, but those go through so much that you can get that better information. Now, Dr. Vial, we're going to try to start off with you because we have so much to talk about.
Wait, Virginia.
Yes.
What are you drinking?
Oh, heavens, right? We're on the wine show.
Look, let me tell you, I'm never going to forget about a drink. So I'm just throwing it out there.
No, I appreciate it. And it is the weekly wine. And I'm so excited to be back and to be talking about legal things that are happening I'm drinking wine, but I forgot about it. So I am drinking a red. We have done it on the show before, but it's such a wonderful thing that I always have in my pantry that I grabbed it for our weekly show. It's the Cabernet Franc red wine from my favorite vineyard, the Mariah Vineyards and Winery, from Bealton, Virginia, out in the Manassas Way, Bull Run, Battle of Bull Run. So check it out. We'll also put that in the links as always, and it's a lovely red. You have Pepsi today, Dr. Vial.
Yes, I
Popping
do.
it up.
The official
Nice.
drink of MTSU.
I know, it kills me that you don't have Coke products.
No, I know. I actually prefer oligopolies to monopolies. But
Look it up if you don't know what it means. All right. And Chelsey, what about you? I haven't seen any drink for you.
Ta-da. So I'm back at it with the boxed wine. However,
Nice.
today I'm drinking Winking Owl Pinot,
Oh, we love that one.
which is, for all of you that don't know, it's the very elusive Aldi brand of boxed wine, and it is really good. So here we are.
I remember it was one of our first shows that we drank it, and I also approve of the Winking Owl. It is very good. So
I love it.
welcome back, everybody. Cheers. And yeah, cheers. Find your Pepsi. There we go. Cheers. And here we go. Thank you, Chelsey, for that reminder. Dr. Vial, I'm going to go to you. We have so many different topics with just this one trial for Trump. Which one would you like to start with? I'm going to leave it up to you.
well, let me ask you a question, because I
Oh.
didn't realize I didn't know till we started.
Okay.
So this is a jury trial.
Yes.
Was it required to be, or is this something that Trump requested? Or I'm assuming that he may have had the choice. And what does that tell us? That he probably thinks he would do better with a group of non-specialists than by a judge who's going to go
Yes.
black letter law.
Absolutely.
So, and if that's true, then the irony is that he has spent almost every day dissing jurors even before they were chosen.
Right.
And, to the extent as I guess we'll get into of, Wednesday night, posting a false claim by Fox News that, liberals are trying to sneak into the camp by lying when they do the surveys. So
Yeah.
one wonders. Now, I don't know. Can jurors, are they permitted to watch the news at night?
They're not supposed to once they're chosen. Honestly, they're not supposed to once they're in the jury pool. They are instructed by the judge not to. Now,
That would
how
be
many
like
of them
capital
do?
punishment for me.
Oh, you
I
would,
don't think I could serve on a jury.
you would never be selected for this one, nor would I.
Well, so far they have 2 attorneys, but yeah, maybe no professors. So there's probably a reason for that.
Chelsey, talk
Okay,
about the
no.
attorneys.
Okay, I've been waiting to talk about this because anyone who's seen our jury episodes, I want to be on a jury so badly. And every time I've gotten called, have gotten kicked off, it's like I'm banned from it and I don't understand. And I thought
Chelsey.
becoming an attorney, I sealed my deal of never being able to be on a jury. But hey, we have hope now because there are two, not just one, but two attorneys on the jury for this trial, which I have a renewed hope because I desperately want to be on a jury.
But aren't they, didn't you say they're white shoe attorneys? And
Yes.
so you still might not qualify. And probably would explain that term.
No, it's perfect. And I heard it the other, it's coming out in the news. These are white shoe attorneys. And I kept thinking white collar attorneys, but there's a difference. White collar attorneys are generally considered criminal defense attorneys who represent more high collar crimes. For celebrities, higher individuals who are committing more fraudulent or conspiracy or complicated cases, honestly, they would be Trump's defense attorneys.
I was going to say that's this.
In this case. Yes, you're absolutely right, Chelsey. That's who would normally represent Trump in this type of case. Not for the other cases. Those would be normal criminal defense attorneys. But a white shoe attorney is different from a white collar attorney because these are attorneys who are considered, at least in law school, the elite attorneys. The really smart attorneys. These are the ones that, were the top of the class, made the order of the coif. I did really well, but I was not them. They're the ones who went to the really big, well-known law firms, especially on Wall Street, in DC, the ones that do insurance, reinsurance. They don't handle criminal cases. They are usually civil litigators handling civil cases. They're kind of like white collar because they do a lot of financial issues, but they're not criminal attorneys. So these two people, okay, I see them as they got on the jury because they don't handle criminal cases. They do civil cases. But, they went through these jury questionnaires, were extremely specific. And what is happening, and Dr. Vial, I'm going to come back to your question about the original, how did he get a jury trial to begin with? But these questionnaires have gone into all of their social media. Do you watch the news? How often do you watch the news? Which news channels do you watch and do you follow? So even just specific news channels like Fox or CNN, they're cutting jurors because of which types of news they go to.
They're looking at what memes they've shared on Facebook.
Yes.
I mean, I think
they're reading them out.
Which is wild. I mean, I kind of love the fact that like Facebook memes are being read into a court record. I do think that's hysterical. Some of my I just think that's funny. I'm sorry. Maybe one day it will not be funny. I think it's pretty funny right now. But
poor Trump. He's listening to the memes against him. In court, they're reading them out. So memes that aren't for him, memes about Biden, memes about Trump, they're all being read out and he can't respond. He can't say anything about them. He just has to listen to them. But if they've been posting, honestly, the three of us would never be chosen. Because they'd say, oh, look, these podcasts all about Trump, whatever our opinions, the fact that we've been following all of the Trump cases so closely, Chelsey, the fact that you and I did such a deep dive into these charges, we know too much about the case.
Yeah.
So somehow out of all of Manhattan, they're going to find people who don't know about this case or don't know enough about it.
That's the interesting part is they're saying you're not going to find anybody who doesn't know or have an opinion about Trump. But if you can say, yeah, I know, I have an opinion about Trump. I know a little bit about the case, but I can be impartial, then that's good enough.
No one would believe me.
It doesn't just apply to Manhattan.
Correct.
I mean, they've been calling for a change of venue. You can go any place in the United States. And, the complaints that, first of all, Biden administration has nothing to do with this one. This is a state prosecution.
Right, not federal.
But what seems to work against him here, where he's in a place that not many people voted for him, may very well help him down in Florida in the documents case where a good majority of the people in that county apparently are for Trump.
Well, Florida's more of a Trump seat. Mar-a-Lago's based there. It's an extremely Republican state.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the jury, so let's go back to why there's a jury in the first place. In the civil case we just got done with in New York, there was no jury there. It is a civil case. Yes, you can have juries for civil cases. Chelsey, you and I have juries for some of our cases. But in the specific charge or complaint that was made, the allegations, the claim that was made in these civil cases for the Attorney General, there's no jury allowed. According to that law, the specific claim against him, the law that was used, does not allow a jury trial. So
Was it because it was so highly technical? I mean, involved large amounts of money.
I honestly don't know why the legislature made it that way, but it was a legislative decision through New York as they decided in enacting this law that the Attorney General used that you didn't have a jury. So you could certainly go back and try to read the reasons why the law was enacted. And it very well could be, Dr. Weil, that that's the reasoning. It is so highly complicated and technical. But he wasn't allowed a jury by law. In the Constitution, Dad, let's go to you. Are jury trials required? Do we get a jury?
Well, it's been you have a guarantee in the Bill of Rights for a jury trial in criminal cases.
There we go.
And actually in federal civil cases over like $20, something ridiculously low.
But that's not in the Constitution. That's in another
section
law.
14, 41, and 43. Look at that.
Oh, in the Bill of Rights for the civil cases?
No.
Yes,
That
Seventh
is
Amendment is what I'm saying.
of the USC, the code.
Right, the United States Code. So there was another law that was enacted, not in the Constitution, for the civil trials in federal courts. But that doesn't apply to the states, Dr. Weil, like you're saying. So he's not required under the Constitution or the laws of New York to have a jury in that civil case.
But what's a little complicated, and I believe there's a Yale professor, Akil Lamar, who thinks that we have this wrong. Most people who are entitled to jury trials do not take them.
Correct.
He thinks that the guarantee means that you should effectively, if I understand him, in criminal cases at least be required to have a jury.
Yeah.
And this goes sort of a related issue is plea bargaining.
Yes.
Plea bargaining is not mentioned at all in the Constitution.
Nope.
It saves a lot of money. It expedites the process. But we do know that there are times where people plead to things that they didn't do rather than go through the ordeal or the expense of a trial. So it's always something that's, needs to be accounted for and thought about.
Yeah. So in the Constitution, it is the defendant's right.
Yes.
So like you're saying,
That's how it's
they
been
can
interpreted.
opt out.
Yes.
They can choose not to have a jury trial. They can choose to plead straight up or to do a plea bargain in which the prosecution agrees, or they can agree to a bench trial where just one judge decides. And Dr. Weil, this goes to your original question is, why did Trump choose a jury? I believe it was because he was hoping for jury nullification. Or for people that there would be 12 people who could not agree what his sentence or what his conviction would be. Whereas one judge, more acquainted with the law, more acquainted with these civil cases and these financial cases, it's only one person who decides. Whereas 12 people can disagree. And if you have enough Trump supporters on the jury who can strike down, no, I don't believe he's guilty,
Well,
at
all
least.
you need is one, right?
Exactly.
Well,
at least
all you
one.
need is one for a hung jury.
Correct.
Now, the flip side of that is you are setting yourself up for a greater chance that you're going to be retried 2 or 3 times.
Yes.
Until you get a unanimous jury.
The hung trial, a hung jury. Yes. Yeah. All you need is the one. Please go back to our podcasts on the juries because I think they're fascinating. We give a lot of background and stories about it. Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Weil.
Well, I know because it's in another one, you don't want to retread too much territory, but people do need to know each side has been given 10 peremptory challenges, challenge for any reason. You can have unlimited number, if somebody's related to Trump or related to Stormy Daniels, and that's for cause, or, they're blatantly pro-Trump or anti-Trump, that's for cause.
Yeah.
But, Trump's complaint that he only got 10, both sides got 10. That is the standard in this case. And my understanding, if it were a capital offense, I think they get 20 each.
Correct.
But for this particular crime that he's accused of, he's being given the proper number of peremptory challenges.
It's not him. They didn't set these procedures just for him. It's
No,
all
that's right.
criminal
Both
cases
sides.
in this case in New York. They didn't. There's no conspiracy to only give him 10. Nobody's allowed an unlimited number of juror strikes. That's not how it's done. You can't do it, whether you're Trump or a normal defendant. Chelsey, speak to that. I know you're dying to get in here.
Yes. About so many things. But I think the idea of the strikes for cause, but there's always, like, this is procedure. Like you said, this is just highlighting how things operate in the court system.
In criminal court.
As someone who has a lot of criticism of the criminal legal system, I never thought I would be saying this, but here Trump is bringing to light issues that I think we can talk about. But this isn't one. Like, the idea that we have a certain number of strikes, peremptory strikes. I feel like 10 is a lot. I've never done jury selection, so you can talk about that a little bit. But I think it's funny. I don't know. I can't even conceptualize what it would look like if we had unlimited strikes for everybody all the time. Nothing would ever
We'd never
get
have
done.
a juror.
Right,
We
would
never have any
a
juror. We just wouldn't. I mean, it's hard to pick a jury, and if you have unlimited strikes, you're going to strike everyone. And Trump was complaining he didn't get a jury trial in the civil case. It's not allowed. It's not just him. That's the charge that it was. He is allowed a jury trial. He chose to have a jury trial. He chose it. He opted in. He chose to exercise the right, knowing the rules. And if he didn't know the rules, that's his fault. His attorneys have a duty, an ethical duty, to tell him what the law is. And he should already have known. Now, he doesn't like it, clearly. He doesn't like what the rules are, but they're not limited to him. They're all defendants, and I think that's what I like about this judge.
And it's not really important. Trump you can't separate the legal from the political here.
It's so hard, yeah.
He's as interested in making the public think he's being treated unfairly as he is in what the actual procedures are. So if it had been unlimited, he would probably complain, well, the other side has unlimited peremptory challenges.
Yeah, they struck all the ones I wanted. Right.
So a lot of this is political posturing, and part of this is motivated by the fact that he's required to be in court during a criminal trial. So that necessarily limits the campaigning that he would otherwise be able to do. I think, am I right? This is why they've given Wednesday. That's pretty uncommon. Usually you go through all 5 days.
Through.
They've given Wednesdays off so that if he wants to take a trip to, Florida or Pennsylvania or, one of these key states, that he has the ability to do it.
Right. That is unusual. That is not given to every defendant, and honestly is a privilege that he's been given as a defendant that no other defendant gets. You go straight through. I've been an attorney in multiple trials, and if that's the way it lasts, you go Monday through Friday, you stay late if you need to, you come back the next Monday through Friday. This is what you do. And he is complaining that he has to be there, but it's not just him. Every defendant in a criminal jury trial, they have to be there. The judge will issue, not because it's Donald Trump, but because he's a criminal defendant in a continuing current trial, jury trial, criminal.
And why is that? Is that, I mean, I know you have the right to confront witnesses against you, but why isn't it like the jury option where you can say, well, I have the right, but I'd rather not hear what people have to say about me. I'll let my attorneys do that and I'll just stay home. Do you know what the theory is there?
I do and I don't. So I will say my limitations, and Chelsey, if you have opinions on it, please do that next. I don't want to cut you off. So there is the right to confront witnesses. Look, we're looking at, 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendment. Search and seizure is 4th. We've got the 5th, which is the right to remain silent. We've got the 6th, which is the jury trials, etc. And he has the right to be there. And you're right, Dr. Vile. I'm like, why can't he opt out? As much as he's opting in, why can't he opt out? I wouldn't want to be in a trial against me either. He opted out of the civil trials. He didn't have to be there. How many times did he? Yeah. Right. He showed up for a few times. Right. The E. Jean Carroll case, the first one, he never showed up at all. Yep. They played a deposition of him, but he never showed up. So for the criminal one, I'm honestly not sure. I know it's required of most, especially, state rules, and I don't know New York law. So this is my limitation. I do not know New York law. I know what's been going on through the press, and what's been said is that he is required to be there. My guess, someone can say, is that it's a rule that they have to.
It might be, if you think about a jury, they are trying to take the measure of the man or woman on trial.
That they're trying to decide their guilt.
Right.
Or
and
innocence.
To the extent that they're watching their reactions, that may very well be one of those subtle indications of guilt or innocence that doesn't, the difficulty we have, I think, even here talking about, jury selection and trials. We know what the news is reporting.
Yes.
But, and I found this on this Crumley case. You may remember, I was very skeptical, not so much of the father, but when the woman was on trial,
mom.
I really was afraid she was being tried for being a bad parent as opposed to, facilitating a murder here. But jurors apparently saw something that I didn't.
Yeah.
And when you look at some of her subsequent reaction, it's like, well, maybe they were right about that.
And that's interesting that you say that. It could be very good and very bad for a defendant. Now, they can be taken out. Okay.
Yes.
They can be removed or gagged, even handcuffed and brought in, but it's based on their behavior. So what I'm waiting for is over all of these months, I am waiting to see if he will be removed by the judge for comments or behavior, because the jury does see just as much as he can watch the jury and the witnesses, they watch him. And I remember specifically one of my most interesting trials was a defendant who represented himself, pro se. And it was one of the most difficult trials that I had because they don't know the rules, but they have to be held to it. And one of the voir dire questions, one of the questions I asked potential jurors to decide could they be on the jury and would I strike them, was, do you understand that if a defendant chooses to represent themselves, they are held to the same laws as the attorneys are bound by? And even if he doesn't actually know what those rules are, he has to be held to them. Is there anyone who would not find him guilty just because he doesn't know the law, like he's held to according to our rules? And we struck several members, but in the end, in the closing arguments, this guy was, crazy is a medical term. I apologize for those out there who want to criticize. I am using this.
He was not legally trained.
He was not legally trained. And I will tell you, his behavior, even if he had been represented by counsel, his behavior in the courtroom was quite erratic, quite bold. There were lots of things that he did, even within the law, that you could look at him and be like, oh, I can measure the man based on what he's saying, based on what he's doing. And in the closing, I was able to say, and I apologize for my dogs, I was able to say in the closing, as a juror, you can consider everything that's happened in this courtroom in making your decision, including the behavior of the defendant, including the statements of the defendant.
And to put in a plug for your profession, right?
Yeah.
The person who has himself or herself for a client
is
for a lawyer has a fool for a client. Right?
Yeah.
And sadly for him, now I believed very strongly he was guilty, and the jury clearly did. But it was fascinating because the jurors disliked, we got to talk to a few of them afterwards, they disliked him so much based on his behavior. He was mocking people. He was rolling his eyes. He was staring them down. He was doing, he was making noises. He was doing so many interesting things. I mean, it was a fascinating trial, but he had so many behaviors that clearly were making demonstrations and saying things without him saying things, that they found him guilty, which wasn't a surprise, of one of the two charges, not guilty of the other, which was fascinating and a good thing. But when it came to sentencing, they tagged him. It was a crime that normally, if it were a bench trial, he'd have all suspended time. And in that particular case, they disliked him so much based on the behavior they saw, the conduct that they saw him doing, that they gave him 1.5 years
Wow.
in jail.
And if I may add, the problem in this case,
In Trump's case, yeah.
right, in Trump's case, is that if a former and potential future president of the United States stares you down, and this is already happening in jury selection,
Yes.
or starts muttering, you might literally be fearful of your life.
And this goes towards jury intimidation. Chelsey, what are you seeing on this?
Yes, I'm going to throw in one thing.
Please.
My theory about why to keep the defendants in the courtroom is it's just really like a CYA for the judge, right? The idea that appeals later based on constitutional rights being violated, based on saying, oh, I had ineffective assistance of counsel or whatever those may be later. I really believe they just force, even if there's not a state rule, they just force the defendants to be in a criminal trial because there are those heightened sort of requirements. It makes me think of the one couple weeks ago, months ago. Time is fake. I have no idea when this happened. But it was a gentleman who had he ran the car into the parade.
Oh,
and
yes.
He was erratic and they ended up putting a spit hood on him. And he was attempting to represent himself. And the judge, even though she did not have to do this, made a public defender come sit next to him the entire time. And I think that was really just to prevent any arguments about going forward. We don't need to revisit this. He had every opportunity. So that's my tangential thoughts on why we keep defendants in the courtroom during a criminal trial. But on the jury intimidation, I think there's a huge argument that, the president of the United States former president of the United States, ranting and raving and rolling his eyes and then getting on the internet to say things about you is a great case for jury intimidation.
I wouldn't want to be on the jury. I wouldn't.
Oh my God, no.
And after the first day first 2 days, you had 7 jurors chosen.
Correct.
And 2 have already been dismissed. One apparently because, it really wouldn't be that hard, I fear, to track down if somebody's missing 5 weeks from work and you know that they're an attorney or a hairdresser or whatever it is. I think some of them have some justifiable concerns here.
I agree. And looking back at Trump has a lot of power.
Yes.
And a lot of sway over people. And if he says something against someone, let's look at all the threats against the judges.
Yes.
The threats against witnesses that he's had and their daughters and their clerks and everyone, where if you're a juror and you're found out we could probably all find out who the jurors are. And he has a gag order on him where he's not supposed to talk about the jurors or the witnesses. But you're right, Dr. Vial, is looking at, if I'm found out, how many bomb threats have been issued against the judges? How many of these SWAT things are being done against the judges? How many other people are being intimidated and called and harassed and threatened with their life that Trump has talked about, that if I as a juror or a witness am talked about by Trump or the people he is associated with, what's going to happen to me?
That's essentially what some of the arguments made by the election workers, the poll workers in Georgia, were that they had been harassed and intimidated, et cetera. There's whole civil suits about
by Trump supporters.
There's a lot, but by Trump supporters because he was sort of railing against them. I do think it's a legitimate, concern, especially when he's on the internet saying things or tweeting things, violating the gag order. At least the prosecution is contending that he has.
Interestingly, typically you violate a gag order, you're fine.
Yes.
But I think it's like 1 out of 10 or better are sometimes actually confined to prison for this.
Correct. And he
So,
could be.
yeah, he could
He's
be.
playing with fire. He's towing the line of how much can I say without crossing this line? Chelsey, were you able to find the 3 statements that he's been, there's a motion hearing next Tuesday as to whether he will be, there, that he did violate the gag order for 3 specific statements and whether he will be fined. But Dr. Weil, you're right. If there are too many, if it's a specific type of statement, he can be jailed. It's not just a fine he's looking at. It is right now, but he can be jailed. And just like the jurors who, honestly, I believe that they will have to be, Chelsey, what's the right word that I can't think of at the moment?
Sequestered.
There we go. Thank you. I believe in the end of this, they are going to have to be sequestered.
Oh, absolutely.
Because I don't know
Which
how you
means, so
yes,
people
please.
know. I mean, basically means they're kept together in a place where they're not going back and forth from home.
They
having to
can't.
worry about.
They can't watch the news. All their electronics are taken from them. They cannot. They cannot have access to news or social media or anybody else who knows
Again,
about
for
it.
me, that would be close to capital punishment.
It would be, and it's hard to be a juror if you're sequestered. But the idea behind it is you should not be influenced by the outside world.
Right.
But with the idea that Trump has so much power and influence that other people who aren't, he's like, oh, I didn't do it. Somebody else did. But let me quote Spider-Man stuff. With great power comes great responsibility. And how are you going to use the power you exert? And over the past year, I'll be honest, and my own opinion, for whatever it's worth, and people can hate me, I don't care. But the power that he has not been used for good. It's been used and interpreted possibly, allegedly through actual criminal indictments for inciting the riots, the alleged riots, however you want to phrase it. People are disagreeing as to whether they're riots. The January 6th incident. It's been used to propel people who are taking his statements as, well, I should attack that election worker. I should threaten this judge. I would never want to be a judge. I would never want to be a juror. Someone approaches me to be a judge. No thanks. It's hard enough to be an attorney. I don't want to be targeted. These people, I feel sorry for them, honestly.
Okay, but so we get the, let me rephrase it. Trump does not always, like Lincoln, appeal to the better angels of our nature.
Right.
But to say something else, jurors really do, in a case like this, they fulfill an important function.
Yes.
And
they're so needed.
They probably won't be acknowledged, at least in the short term, but we need people who are willing to say, yes, I have political opinions. I have opinions about the man, but I will do my best. And I will pledge to try to make a decision on the basis of the evidence before me.
Exactly.
And that is, that responsibility in some ways is a far more important responsibility than just going and casting a vote.
Absolutely.
For some of the other things that it's a major component of democratic citizenship.
Yes.
And it's important because we may be in a case someday where we are falsely accused, or, we want a jury of our peers. And if that's going to happen, it means there need to be people willing to step forward to do this. So it really isn't, and if everybody quotes de Tocqueville, but de Tocqueville has chapters on the educative function of the jury. And in part, it was because this is where people would go and they would be instructed by people who knew the law.
Yeah.
And they would be sort of cultured in how you have a fair proceeding and how you weigh evidence. So it's a very important role. And yes, there's some danger here, but I really wouldn't want anybody to get the notion that they should try to shirk jury duty.
Oh, absolutely. I would be honored to be a juror. I will probably never be chosen as one, but I would be honored to, because it is a duty. They don't get paid anything. They don't, but it is so essential.
Well, they do get paid. They get like a per diem or
$2. I mean, like $12. It's like not even minimum wage for each day. But I agree. As many jury trials as I've had, I'm not important. The jury is. I have an issue of persuasion. It is my responsibility to represent advocate on someone's behalf, but it's not my final decision. I think the people who have the final decision are the most important people in that trial. They absolutely are. But if they are intimidated, if the witnesses are intimidated and won't come forward, this is a domestic violence issue. For cases of domestic violence, it's a huge problem. Will that abuser actually threaten or intimidate them? They don't want to testify. I had a murder case. This is in the podcast that we did. I had a murder case where we had a witness who said, I am scared. I don't want to. They had been in prison for something else, but they had witnessed a murder. He ended up testifying, and 3 months later, he was dead. It happens. So the judge in this trial versus the civil trial, because it was only the judge who was deciding, he let so much go that would normally not be allowed or, tolerated in a criminal case. This judge in the criminal case looked at Trump at the first day of jury selection and said, you're not going to do that. It looks like you're intimidating a potential juror. Chelsey, do you remember I think it was he staring the person down? What happened?
He was muttering, wasn't he? On one of the occasions.
Yeah, he was looking at them and sort of muttering under his breath, is my understanding. And I did find 2 out of the 3 direct quotes that were posted on Truth Social. And I don't think you guys know this yet. While I was pulling up the exact quotes, in the past 2 hours, the prosecution has now alleged 7 other violations of the gag order.
Oh my goodness. And it's Thursday when we're taping this. So we haven't gotten to the end of the week. So it's the 3rd day of jury selection. And how many more have been alleged? According
to the article I just saw, 7. And to be fair, so I've never seen Truth Social before.
Yeah, I haven't looked at it.
And I pulled up I could find 2 out of the 3 infractions that we're already talking about. But I did click on Donald Trump's Truth Social page. I'm not very familiar with that media, but when I went to scroll through what had been posted or retruthed, don't quote me on that, of, sort of reposted, there were lots and lots of things within the last 6, 12, 18 hours, to the point where I could not even find the 3 original posts that sort of sparked this. But I will give you, like I said, I could find 2 out of the 3.
Tell us the 2 out of the 3. And when you say them, I would love for you to say why you think they're potentially a problem. Why is the prosecution saying you violated the gag order?
Yeah, so I think the first one that I have for you is a lot more straightforward. So this is a quote that says, and this was referring to Michael Cohen and Stormy Daniels, who
2 witnesses.
Presumably will be witnesses. Quote, 2 sleazebags who have, with their lies and misrepresentations, cost our country dearly. I'm sorry, it's not funny because this should be so serious, but it is objectively silly goofy to me that we have a defendant in a criminal trial with so much sway, so blatantly. Disrespect isn't the right word, but I would say attacking 2 of the lead witnesses in a criminal trial. I think if we
why is it a problem? Why do you think it's a problem that this statement and the next one that you're going to read are what's wrong with them? Can't he just say under the First Amendment what he wants to say?
So I think we have this idea of, the judge is making rulings in an attempt to have as fair a trial as possible. And having a defendant who has a platform like Donald Trump has, and sort of the reach he has to people impacts that. And I think if we have this being duked out over social media, which is objectively absurd, that's going to impact how things, play out in a courtroom. And that's not what we want. We want the courtroom to sort of be this sanctity that we can have a fair and as impartial proceedings go on without this nonsense happening outside of it. And I think in the gag order specifically, he was told not to speak about any of the jurors or witnesses or the judge, etc.
Why would he be gagged? What is the purpose of a gag order that tells a defendant you can't talk about the jurors, you can't reference the witnesses? Why are they doing that?
I mean,
It seems just mean and like they're trying to violate the First Amendment. So why aren't they? What's wrong with the First Amendment freedoms? What's the difference?
I just think this is, preserving the idea of a fair trial and not influencing the jury. Like, we have rules of evidence for a reason, right? Not everything that could be relevant gets brought into a criminal trial because we have evidentiary standards. And I think that trying to sway things that might not be admissible in court, right? Like that's sort of the difference. And I think it's an important distinction.
Yeah. There are so many state rules where there are criminal charges for intimidation of witnesses.
Yes, that too.
This is a huge issue. I mentioned domestic violence, but let's talk about gangs.
Yeah.
The gang issue I prosecute.
Or mobs.
Or mobs.
Can you imagine,
in New York, yeah.
Can you imagine El Chapo like tweeting out things about the witnesses against him? Like that would be absurd.
Would you testify if something had been said out by a gang or El Chapo or a mob? If that had been put out, would you testify?
Right, exactly. I think
I would risk jail time for refusing to testify so that I can save my life or the life of my family. Forget me to talk about my family.
I think I'd give the statement that El Chapo's wife did was that I never saw him do anything illegal. I think that, right, if we had someone who was I only use that because I feel like everyone sort of gets that reference of like the level of influence, control, sort of network out there, we would be aghast. I assume most people would be.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many times this witness who died 3 months after, or however the 3 months roughly after, would another person who witnessed this murder, there was a large group, are they going to come forward? No.
Yeah.
Because are they going to be gotten to? Now, ultimately, it was found it was another gang in the other area, but people want to preserve their lives. They want to preserve their reputations. They want to preserve the way their lives are. And, for the judges, the judge said, okay, the gag order doesn't apply to me, but then his wife was targeted. The two judges, their their family members were targeted. To me, it would be much more striking of if you're going to, forget me, I can be brave. I can have courage if something happens to me while I've tried to do justice. But what about my family? How many people do more things to protect their family members? And if these jurors have family members, the judges that have family members and they're threatened or they're, all this stuff is on the media just because you're involved in the case, as a juror or as a witness, you wouldn't want to necessarily do what's right. You wouldn't want to tell the truth. You wouldn't want to judge just by the law. There are these influences besides your duty to justice. Right. Under the Constitution, your duty for fairness, neutrality that come in. I encourage you all, one of my favorite movies. I hate so many movies and TV shows about law stuff. I end up yelling at the television. You can't do that. That's not real. Law and Order, honestly, is one of the worst for me. I cannot watch it. I love the show. The characters, the acting is fantastic, but legally it's like, yeah, whatever.
What do you mean you don't go to trial the next day after an arrest? What do you
You don't. The timeline is horrible. Like CSI, all this stuff, the timeline
60 minutes.
Right. It's done in an hour. But one of the best movies I have seen related to jury selection is The Runaway Jury. Have you all seen this? Tell me you've seen this. Oh my goodness. Okay, I'm ashamed and embarrassed that you both know me and have not watched this movie. It was either late 90s, early 2000s. I cannot tell you how many times I have watched this movie and recommended it to law students, other lawyers. I encourage you to go and look at this. It is one of the most accurate depictions of jury selection, jury sequestering, jury influences, of what happens and what could happen, what they're influenced by, how they're chosen, why they're not chosen, how, Dr. Vial, you mentioned at the very beginning, can someone sneak on the jury who is trying to get Trump found guilty or not guilty? I mean, it could happen on either side. And the runaway jury is about a gun case, a case against a gun manufacturer for a a mass shooting in an office building. But Rachel Weisz was in it. It was fantastic. Some of the best acting I've ever seen, and the best jury selection legality, honest to God. But the issue of the gag order is do not improperly influence these people. Mm-hmm. Where, if they're going to lie, let them lie, but not because you've influenced them, not because you've put fear in them. Right. Chelsey, did you have the second one? I mean, honestly,
yes. I saved the best for last.
Tell us the second one that he's on the hook for.
So this is the one we're talking about that is sort of attacking the jury directly. Mm-hmm. Now, this was a post that Trump made quoting someone else. He was quoting
this was the Wednesday one.
Yes. Mm-hmm. But to be fair, I want to make a distinction. This was not a repost or a retruth. It was he, typed it out himself.
Or his account. Someone operating his account.
I like to think he's, tussling with an intern over who gets to send out these posts. But that's just my own entertainment.
You can post mine, Chelsey.
And so this is what he said. They are catching undercover liberal activists lying to the judge in order to get on the Trump jury.
Mm-hmm. And this is why I encourage everybody to watch The Runaway Jury, because the idea behind it is there's someone infiltrating the jury who's lying to get on the jury, who has an agenda. And
okay,
does
I think
it happen?
I might have read this in a book. Did this start as a book?
I don't remember, honestly. It might have.
I was going to say, I feel like I read a book with that exact plot. So maybe I read it and not have seen it, but I'm adding that to my watch list.
Yeah, please do. It's absolutely incredible. I think Gene Hackman is in it as one of the attorneys. A fabulous show, movie. But the idea is, and I think what Trump is asking too is, can someone infiltrate the jury? I think he's hoping that a MAGA supporter, a Trump supporter, will infiltrate the jury, will get on. I think a lot of jurors go in, and I will say this honestly, for a popular jury, like the Gwyneth Paltrow, the Johnny Depp juries, I think a lot of people go in of, how can I trick the system?
Yeah.
I will, maybe I shouldn't be disclosing this, but it is in one way. And I will tell you the most common way. If someone's going to infiltrate the system, I will tell you the most common way it happens.
Uh-oh. Machiavelli.
I don't know what you're talking about. You can talk about Machiavelli, but let me tell you how. There are it depends on how your voir dire is set up, and in every state it's different. Bear with me on this example. In Maryland, so I started out in Virginia. I've done 18 and a half years, but most of my time was in Virginia, and still is. I still practice in Virginia. But you could do, as a prosecutor and defense attorney, you could do your own voir dire. You could ask them, there are limits of what you can ask. You can't ask irrelevant things or inflammatory things, try to influence the jury. But you have a lot more leeway. You're able to ask the questions of, how many people have seen CSI? How many people believe we can solve all crimes with, these miraculous machines, that we have to have DNA, that we have to find the murder weapon? You have a lot of leeway to ask those questions and to make that rapport with the jury. In Maryland, I got to Maryland and they're like, yeah, you can't ask any of that. You have to submit your questions to the judge. The judge decides which ones he's going to ask and which ones he's not. He's the only one who does the voir dire. And I was horrified. It's like, what is this? So each state has their own rules as to whether the attorneys direct it, whether the judges direct it, who proffers the questions, which questions you choose. New York is doing the same thing, right? They're having to haggle over which questions they can ask, who gets to present it, whether Trump is available and eligible to be there when a juror is questioned. And ultimately, if you're in a jurisdiction where there are only a few questions, there are very limited questions, or if you're in a jurisdiction where you don't have to talk. So in Virginia, you say, if you agree with this, raise your hand. And if they don't raise their hand, if they never raise their hand, I can't individually question them because they haven't contradicted or agreed with anything that I said. So the person most likely to infiltrate a jury is the jury member who doesn't say anything.
Well, that
because
makes so
I don't
much
know
sense
what
of why
they
I could never
think.
get on. I
But
could
here,
never shut
everyone
up.
has had to answer 40-some questions.
In
so,
New York, and they've
yeah.
and they've gotten to review all of their social media.
Right.
They've gotten to review the accounts that they have, the things that they've said in public. And in all jurisdictions, the lawyers try to find out as much as they can outside of the courtroom beforehand about the jurors. But there are some things that if you didn't ask the question, you don't have to answer. You don't have to volunteer. How many people in this trial, there were over half of the jurors struck in Trump's trial for the first question. Is there anyone who something to the effect of, is there anyone who cannot be neutral in this case? Right. Over half of the people raised their hand or marked yes or whatever it was.
That was a little unusual.
It was.
Often a judge in a regular case, a judge would say, well, let's get into that.
Agreed.
And then you talk them through it and say, oh, well, yeah, I could
yes.
give a decision based on the evidence in the case.
You're able to rehabilitate them.
Right,
That's what it's called. You can call them up. You can do whatever your jurisdiction
and
allows.
It sounds like this one, just for the purposes of people were saying the jury selection was going to take 2 or 3 weeks.
We already have at
by
least
the
5.
first day or two, it will not. But now we've had a couple of subsequent developments.
Right.
So who knows?
Yeah, you have to have 12 jurors. We had 7. Now I think we have 5 at least.
Well, and I think they're trying to get 18, aren't they? They're
6
trying
alternates.
to get
you have to. The people who end up having conflicts or they hear something that they disagree with, they become improperly influenced. The person who went and watched the news and they weren't supposed to, they get struck. That sort of thing. But I will make a prediction, and it's going to light the country on fire when it happens. But I am predicting, and you can agree, I would love to get responses. You can hate me or not. I don't care. As an attorney watching this trial, I am predicting that Trump is going to be in jail. I am predicting that
you mean gag order
for a gag order violation. That there are so many. You're saying how many today between Wednesday night and Thursday? We have how many? Yeah. He's already we've got hearings on Tuesday just for $1,000. But at what point are they going to say he's making so many comments he has to be confined? Yes. He has to be sequestered. And the only place a defendant can be sequestered is in jail. The jury can be put in a hotel. They can be put in a safe house, whatever it's called. They can be sequestered outside of jail. They're not going to jail. But a defendant's sequestration, however you pronounce it, is in jail. If you cannot keep quiet, the only place you can go is jail. And I predict he's going to be there. Yes.
Can I ask a dumb question? This might be a dumb question. For something like this, and I really don't know the answer, could he get house arrest with no internet? Is that an option? Could they say, you have to stay in your residence and we are cutting your internet? I mean, not literally, but cutting off the internet.
Right.
Yes.
Are we confining him to the 10,000 square foot residence or the 30,000 square foot?
Right. I mean, I do think the 10,000 might be a little, cruel and unusual.
Yeah.
But
it's too small. No, that's funny. Very much. For those of you who don't know, this is a reflection of the fraud case, the civil fraud case, where he was alleging that the condo or the home that he had and the condo was 10,000 feet rather than the 3,000 something feet it actually was.
No, he was alleging 30,000 for a 10,000.
That's right. I believe. That's right.
You know what? I relate to him. I'm really bad at math too. That I just.
But there's, the measurement. You get out your ruler and you start measuring.
But you know what? I heard somebody on the news last night saying one beauty of Manhattan is everybody knows the square footage of their flat.
Everything. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, you don't make that kind of mistake.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, as an attorney, okay, look at this for me, for everyone who believes they know what I think about Trump, and some of it's true. What I do or don't think about Trump, look at this as me as an attorney. I could not represent Trump. It is hard enough with clients who aren't Trump to tell them and give them a reason of you've got to be quiet on social media. You cannot post this on. Please stop talking. Please stop. because I've had too many clients as personal injury clients who they've gone out in social media. There was one, oh my gosh, it was like in Ireland or something, or Iceland or something, where the lady alleged injuries, and there's her on social media winning the prize for tossing large pine trees.
Yes.
You know, there's what you say can be brought into trial because you've said it. It can be used against you as a plaintiff or defendant or the party. And if you keep saying in public what you're thinking, all of it, how can I help you? I can't contradict those statements. I can't make them go away. If you're saying something in public, it can all be brought into the courtroom. And if they continue to do so, I send letters. I send official certified letters to my clients of, if you do not stop this behavior, I can no longer represent you. If I were representing Trump, which I never would, but if I were, I, as the attorney, would be extremely concerned about all these statements. Of course, you argue that they're not in violation of the gag order. You have to. But as many keep coming and as many as keep towing that line or going over that line, you can't protect your client. And he is making it extremely hard for his counsel to protect him. He is making it extremely hard to prevent his statements from coming in. Whether they're on social media, wherever they are, they will come in against him. And I do not think you can stop him. I don't. Oh. I think he can't help himself. And I think the only confinement is jail. The jury, I think, also will be sequestered. They wouldn't be in jail, but my prediction and during this trial is they will have to be sequestered. And at some point, as many statements as there are that are in controversy, he will have to be jailed. You can't release him to Mar-a-Lago. It's in Florida. Does he even have his penthouse? I don't know. But if he goes to his penthouse anymore, if it's not being taken by the AG, can you prevent him from talking to the media? Can you prevent him from going on True Social? Maybe him, but what if he says something to somebody else who goes and posts on his behalf?
Could there be a political value? And we're keeping track of the time.
Yeah, we're close to the end. We got to wrap it up. Yes, okay. You're right. Thank you.
Politically, could it be like some of the civil rights cases where it's actually okay if you're in prison? Then people really feel sorry for you.
And this,
people who have a different perspective than the lawyer's perspective, well, he's just being put in jail for saying what he thinks.
It's a witch hunt.
Yeah. Yes. And that's where I want to come back to. Thank you, Dr. Vial, for bringing us there, because yes, I think he's going to be in prison, but I think it's going to be a political night. We're looking at another January 6th incident. Is now his supporters, since he can't do anything in jail, his supporters will say he's wrongfully imprisoned for using his right to free speech. He's just trying to do the First Amendment. He's trying to use his rights, and now he's in prison. Now what happens to those jurors?
And there's where our duty comes in.
Yes.
To, that there need not be any more January 6th.
Please,
this is something, there is a legal process to take care of it.
Yes.
And if he follows the rules, he will, even if he doesn't follow the rules, he will be treated as fairly as the legal system is able to do it.
It's the same.
Before, and we don't know that he's going to be convicted of this.
Right. He very well could be acquitted. This is a very technical issue.
Very much. So, if you support Donald Trump, also support the American system, and let's see how this plays out before, and if he is convicted, then, don't jump to the conclusion that it's necessarily because people are against him. Realize that whatever decision is made after, maybe weeks or maybe even months of testimony.
Based on what the jury is hearing.
Right. And again,
but we don't get to hear. It's not live. It's not live streamed. We don't know what's happening in that courtroom.
Just like OJ.
Probably, thank God, it's not live streamed, huh? I mean,
I would do no work. My
I was going to
office
say,
would
as
shut
someone who
down.
would be very easily
The
entertained,
country would grind to a halt.
All I would do is watch this trial. It's probably a good thing. Now, we might be social media, wonderful, because all I'm doing is commenting on the trial, like the Johnny Depp trial ended up making some podcasters, famous. But that would be all I was doing. But I will say, Dr. Vile, to your point, my concern with America is on either side, but honestly, especially the Donald Trump side, the MAGA supporters, the Republicans, my biggest concern and my prayers against, and my prayers that this will not be the American system, is if people recall, and if you don't, check out our podcast. It's very telling and such a monumental event that OJ died right now. Because, Dr. Vile, you'll remember, after the not guilty verdict of him and Rodney King, it was so closely filed by Rodney King.
Yeah.
There was
riots,
so much. There were riots. There were the LA riots, which were horrible.
Right.
We had January 6th based on the 2020 election. We are looking at a time where Americans are inflamed. Yeah. And whatever the jury verdict, whatever happens with Trump, whether he's imprisoned or not, whether he's found guilty or not, my fundamental fear is that we will be looking at a similarity, that we will be looking at an outcry of a violent nature, whether it's the Capitol event on January 6th or the riots in LA.
There's no need, and particularly even the jury verdict could ultimately be set aside.
Absolutely. There's appeals.
Yeah.
There's the appeals process. We have so many appeals. Yeah. It will go up on appeal. It will. If he is found guilty. Now, if he's not found guilty, there's no appeal. But if he is found guilty, it will absolutely go up on appeal. Sure. There's that option. But the possible violence is a concern. I pray that it's not true. I pray that it won't happen. And there are means within the democratic system that we have for reasons not to have violence, to work within the system. Think about Martin Luther King and his theories and his practice of nonviolence. And that brought about the change for civil rights for African Americans. Think of that instead of what did we get for the Rodney King riots that came after, OJ Simpson. We're looking at African Americans again. But in this case, we have such a strong contradiction and of opinions with regard to Donald Trump, and we're looking at 4 criminal trials. This is the first.
And that's why, some things are resolved through elections.
Yes.
But others are, criminal matters are resolved through court processes.
Yes.
And, absent, I mean, you could, if you have Judge Lynch presiding, he was an actual judge, there are some judges who are notorious for having been unfair.
Right.
But given what we know about the judge in this case, he's a man trying, he's educated in the law. He seems to be acting as even-handedly as one could in this situation. Yeah. Let's give the law a chance here.
Absolutely. And especially Republicans, it's all, law enforcement, law and order, that's back the blue.
That's right.
Let's trust the legal system. And yes, the legal system is broken in so many places. It is not perfect, but our system is better than other countries. Right? What could it be?
It's better than the state of nature.
Yes.
Or remember how
this is not the Lord of the Flies.
Right.
Right. We have a system.
I absolutely agree that if you're looking at this and for whatever reason you think what's happening is unfair, I would say, hey, I bet that's happening frequently in your local courthouses. Maybe it's time to look at the people you're electing, look at the laws your legislators are drafting. If this is bringing people's attention to the possible issues within the criminal legal system, great. Let's do something about that.
We can make a change.
We can make a change, especially at your local level, in your state, in your county, about how this plays out. I think that's the thing, is like, this is not some unchangeable thing. And if it takes something this large to bring your attention to it, hi, welcome. There are lots of people who want change. And I think that's the way to do it, and not say the system is rigged and be violent, But
look at the violence. I mean, who now looks like the bad guy in the civil rights movement? It's the police officers who were harming African Americans. It's the people who were harming them.
Yeah.
Right.
And
The
lynchers.
the dogs that were sicked on
Yeah.
them. Those are the bad guys. It's the guys, the people. Sorry, my colloquial terms from being raised in the South. The people who are committing the violence are viewed as the bad men. Rosa Parks just sat on a bus seat. There were marches, but who was the violent person at the marches? It wasn't the people marching for change, calling for change, but change still happened. And who is the bad guy? It's the people who used violence. So we urge you not to. We're going to conclude. We could truly talk about this for hours. We will be talking about Trump again. The trial is ongoing. We hope this gives you a better perspective of what's happening from attorneys' views, from people who have dealt with jury systems, from a constitutional expert, what is happening, why it's happening. Do check out our other podcasts. We will be putting new podcasts out not related to Trump. So watch for those. I promise you they're coming. We're going to hit those topics later. Dr. Vial has some very interesting topics also to address, including Jehovah's Witnesses and the law. A new book that he's working on, article that he's working on. So we've got quite a few interesting things coming up. Follow us for all of the Trump trial, the criminal trial against him in New York. Follow us for the other topics, including the Crumleys, including the Newport News 6-year-old shooting. We have so many things. Follow us, like us, comment, check out our other podcasts, suggest other things. Please don't be rude or mean. Please don't use curse words in your comments. We appreciate comments, but that is not appreciated.
If you do, just tag me directly. Just tag me directly.
We are not going to respond to that. It's taking me months to respond to the comments that are out there. But please, we are not trying to incite anything either. So please be respectful. Please be subscribe, check us out on social media. If you're a law student, an undergrad looking for bar or exam classes, check us out on thelawunscripted.com, where we have 50 different videos and outlines you can choose, 8 outlines you can choose from of, the core 8 subjects, including constitutional law and criminal law. Check out our studies. You can purchase in bulk or individual. We look forward to hearing from you. This is the Legal Weekly Wine. Thank you, Chelsey Rogers, Dr. Vial. It is good to have you back.
Good to be here.
Good to be here.
Check out the Legal Weekly Wine, where we talk about the week's hottest legal topics, and we will check you out next time on our Legal Weekly Wine.
Bye.